Hello, I'm Danielle Deibler with the League of Women Voters of San Francisco. Along with the League and SFGovTV, I'm here to talk about Proposition K, a ballot measure that will be on the ballot for you on Tuesday, November 5th. In 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the city closed the upper grade highway between Lincoln Way and Sloat Boulevard to private vehicles, creating a public open space for recreation. This full closure continued until August of 2021, when the city changed it to apply only on weekends and holidays. In May 2022, the city implemented a pilot program to evaluate mobility, safety, and access in and around the Great Highway with upper grade highway closures on weekends, holidays, and Friday afternoons. The pilot ends on December 31st, 2025, after which the Great Highway will reopen to private vehicles full-time unless changes are made. The closure has created a popular recreational space, averaging 4,000 visitors per day during weekends, making it the third most visited park in the city's park and recreation system. The closure has improved access for residents to enjoy activities like walking, jogging, and biking along the coast, though full accessibility remains a challenge. The location has also led to changed traffic patterns on nearby streets, causing concern among some people about congestion and safety. Proposition K would change the use of the upper grade highway from Lincoln Way to Sloat Boulevard. It would permanently close this stretch to motor vehicles 7 days a week, with some exceptions for emergency vehicles, official government vehicles, intra-park transit shuttle buses, and similar authorized vehicles would still be allowed access at all times, and private vehicles could be authorized in emergencies. Within 180 days of voter approval of this proposition, the city would have to seek approvals for the permanent closure, including amendments to the city's general plan and approvals under the California Coastal Act. The current pilot program would continue until those approvals are obtained, or until December 31st, 2025, whatever comes first. Park development would require additional processes for permits and funding, which would not be allocated by this proposition. The southern portion of the upper Great Highway from Sloat to Skyline Boulevards is scheduled to close permanently to cars by early 2026 due to coastal erosion, regardless of the outcome of this proposition. If you vote yes, you want the city to use the upper grade highway as public, open recreation space, permanently closing it to private motor vehicles 7 days a week with limited exceptions. If you vote no, you do not want to make these changes. I'd like to welcome Heidi Moseson with Friends of Great Highway Park. She's a proponent of Proposition K. And I'd also like to welcome Richard Correa with Open the Great Highway, who is an opponent of Proposition K. Thank you guys for being here today. I'm going to give you, Heidi, an opportunity. We typically have the proponent go first to talk about their position. Sure. So we're going to give you an opportunity to make an opening statement and talk about why you're for this.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the League for the opportunity to be here. I'm an Outer Sunset resident and a working mom, and I support Prop K because it's the right choice for our environment, for our kids, and for our city. So as you've heard, Prop K would create a full-time coastal park on one section of the Great Highway, a section that happens to be very unreliable and unpredictably closed to sand about 60 days a year. And the most useful part of the road, as we'll talk about, has already been legislated to close because it is literally falling into the ocean. Come out and check it out. So drivers are going to have to change their commute patterns anyways. A vote yes on K, conversely, would allow us to implement needed coastal adaptations to protect city infrastructure and build community and joy through a new coastal park. So what's the cost? In dollars, yes on K will actually save the city money. For drivers, the question comes down to which side of a rectangle of roads will we drive on? If we vote no on K, we're going to be left with an expensive, unreliable road that is inevitably going to be closed anyway, and we will continue having these debates for years to come. Because we can't win against the ocean, we can only adapt. So you don't have to take my word for it. Prop K has been endorsed by every major environmental organization, neighborhood and democratic associations across the city and the West Side in particular, and San Francisco leaders across the political spectrum. But to give you a more personal view, when this section of the highway was first closed to cars in the pandemic, it transformed the feeling of the Outer Sunset where I live. For the first time, you could hear the ocean. And it's, even though we only have the park space on weekends now, it continues to bring our community together for Lunar New Year celebrations, the Great Haunt Way, for senior yoga, for childhood storytelling events, and even just to get out on the road for a scoot with my kids after a hectic day at work. And specifically for me, having this car-free space built my confidence with a bike, and actually we replaced my car with an e-bike, and that's now how I get around the city. Because of this space, there is now one less car on the road for those who need to drive. So the choice in Prop K is simple. How do we want to use our one coast? Continue throwing money away to an unreliable road, or will we face our changing climate head on and set aside a section of our coast for an oceanfront park that will increase accessibility, resilience, and joy? And we can do all this without losing a single parking space, and drivers can still get everywhere they need to go.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And Richard?
Hi, my name is Richard Correa. I'm a fourth generation San Franciscan. I live in the outer Richmond. I was a police officer, retired as police commander after 35 years. I spent 10 years of my career at Richmond Station, 2.5 years of those as captain of the station. I know this area well, very well. And Heidi says some things that draw me to counter what she said with facts. But I'm not going to get pulled into that today. What I'm going to tell you is that Prop K is difficult to talk about. And I'll tell you, because I can't find anything good about it at this point, the way that it's written. The one thing Prop K does not do, Heidi, is create a park. There's no mention of a park in there. There's no money for a park. There's no plan for a park. So it is not a park. What it does do will force 14,000 cars a day into the local neighborhoods that are neither designed from an urbanist perspective as quiet streets. They're not thoroughfares. They're neighborhoods where there's people. We also know from their folks who did the proponents folks that did a article in the paper the other day that recognizes that 56% of school-age children are driven to work in this city. Without getting into the details of what that means in terms of more cars, Prop K puts 14,000 cars more into the outer Sunset neighborhood. It forces those cars into already high injury corridors. If you look at the MTA statistics on safety on the Great Highway, there have been 4 accidents that I can find in the last 5 years. And we're going to take all those cars and push them on to Sunset and to 19th Avenue, which are high injury corridors or corridors with lots of accidents. Proposition K also destroys the compromise that was this 2-year compromise time when we could work out, identify the effects of closure and mitigate those effects and plan for it. Prop K crushes that compromise. And what it does also is it lines out the legislative mandates to work on solutions that we can make this into something different in the future. All it does is closes a couple of doors at either end of the street. And this notion that it is a highway that is going to become useless because of the closure at the south end near Lake Merced, I understand you have a question on that. I may deal with that later,
Yep.
But that's simply not true. Finally, on the point of equity, there are
Wrap up just a little tiny bit.
Right.
Yeah,
there are 1,900 acres of park-owned land between the Richmond and the Sunset in San Francisco. In the Bayview, between Potrero Hill and the Bayview District, there are 200. I think if folks want to have a park, they should think about equity and who's getting all the nice parks already.
Okay, so the first question we really have is both sides claim a positive environmental impact for their part, right, for the position that they're taking. Can you kind of explain that to me? And I'm gonna start with you, Heidi, and then we'll follow up with Richard.
Yeah, so absolutely. So a vote for yes on Prop K is absolutely a vote for the environment. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. All of the major environmental organizations have endorsed a yes on Prop K vote, including the League of Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, and many other local groups. So Richard said he enjoys facts. You'll notice he did not mention any facts. And that is because I am an epidemiologist, UCSF trained, did my PhD there. I also know how to look at data. And I can tell you that there are decades of research on what happens when you close bypass roads, which is what this section of the Sunset is, of the Great Highway is. We have data so much data from multiple public institutions and third-party traffic engineers showing where the trips on the Great Highway are going. About 80% of those trips start or end in the South Bay. So already, even right now when you look at Google Maps with the Great Highway open, Google Maps will show you it is equidistant on Great Highway or Sunset Boulevard in terms of vehicle miles traveled and minutes. So naturally, if we close this road to cars, as we do on weekends, cars will be naturally rerouted to Sunset, which is a nearby 6-lane arterial, which is 30% under capacity, can very much handle the traffic that will be going there. Drivers are rational. They are not going to want to go through my neighborhood, which Richard talks about. I live there. I see the impact when the road is closed to cars and when it's open for people. And the traffic concerns don't bear out. This has been studied time and time again. And the issues are small and solvable. And me and my volunteer time with the SFMTA has been working with years to put in place small improvements that can really address the limited bottlenecks we see on Lincoln Boulevard and on Skyline and Sloat. So
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Richard?
The question is,
You want to say the question again? I'm sorry. So both sides claim a positive environmental impact for their position. Can you explain that a little bit more?
well, I think all of us can do better in terms of the environment. The question, the answer to that question is, do we want to take 14,000 cars a day and force it into neighborhoods where people are living and closer to them and on their blocks? Do we want to bring those gases that come out of that car? And Heidi might not run into a lot of her anecdotal information. She wouldn't be writing a paper on this without recognizing that closing bypass roads does have a positive impact. It also has a negative impact in some places. It's a mixed bag. But I think if we're going to move cars into the neighborhood, we should deal with the question of congestion, which is real. That's a lived experience for me. I could show you photographs of Chain of Lakes Drive trying to cross from the Sunset to the Richmond and vice versa during times of closure. It's bumper to bumper and people sit there. And it's not about how long it takes. It's the gases spewing out of their car as they sit in traffic. Traffic is slowed down when there's closures. And this notion that there's undercapacity on Sunset Boulevard, 19th Avenue is going to go through a 3-year repaving. That capacity is shrinking. They're saying there is work going on Sunset Boulevard also. And at the same time, we have Stonestown coming in with hundreds and hundreds of units. So this notion that you just turn a couple of blocks, no. And they talk about sea level rise.
Thank you very much.
Well, I want to finish this point.
Well, you're over time.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
You put that into your, that's what I'm just trying to keep you
Sure.
keep it
Sure.
in that 6 to 12 minute range by the
Perfect.
time we're done with it.
Sure.
Okay, so the second question is, can you explain a little further on the state mandated closure of Upper Great Highway between Sloat and Skyline Boulevard? This tends to be something that people are a little bit confused about, and,
Sure.
and it speaks more to why do we need to do this now, right? Why is this on the ballot kind of a thing? So I'd love to get your perspective on that, Heidi.
Sure. So yeah, there's a lot of talk about closing the Great Highway with Prop K. And I think for folks who don't live out there, I live out there. I live literally on the Lower Great Highway, so I know it well. There are actually 3 parts of the Great Highway. There's a part of the Great Highway north of Lincoln that connects the Sunset to the Richmond. Prop K will touch none of that. That remains open to cars 24/7, connecting our 2 neighborhoods. There's a section of the Great Highway Lincoln to Sloat, which is what Prop K deals with. And then there's a section of the Great Highway called the Southern Extension, which is the Great Highway south of Sloat. So earlier this year, the Board of Supervisors, approved by the California Coastal Commission, has already legislated that that section of the road that connects the Great Highway south of Sloat down to Skyline and onto Daly City into the peninsula is going to be closed permanently because it is, again, as I said, literally falling into the ocean. If you are curious about climate change and coastal erosion, I encourage you to walk out there and check it out. It is dramatic. But all to say, that has been for drivers, as I mentioned, 80% of folks who use the road use it to go down south. Drivers will no longer be able to use the Great Highway for that shortcut connection. They will have to turn inland at Sloat, go around the zoo, and go down. And at that point, when they're turning left on Sloat, they intersect pretty much exactly with where they would get if they went left on Lincoln and right on Sunset. So again, we're talking about a rectangle of traffic that is the choice for drivers. They won't be able to use the Southern Extension anymore because it is falling into the ocean. And so now, do drivers want to turn left at Sloat? We keep spending money maintaining this eroding coastal road, what's left of it, or do they want to turn left at Lincoln with improved signal lighting there, up to a nearby 6-lane arterial, same number of minutes, same number of vehicle miles, and we can make necessary coastal adaptations to the Great Highway and get a beautiful, beloved coastal park out of it.
Thank you very much, Heidi, and then Richard.
Beautiful and beloved. It's not very scientific, but let me say this on climate change, first of all. To drive cars 40 blocks out of their way to get to the same spot and to say somehow that's a benefit to the environment is absurd. That's my last point on that. Let me say, though, these Great Highway extension is interesting. It isn't even scheduled to close until the end of 2025, well within the period of the current compromise that's in place, that we're supposed to be working together to come up with ideas and solutions. Now, the turning on, so the southern extension of the Great Highway by Lake Merced is really not part of this conversation. It's brought in as a point of argument that somehow that necessitates the closing of the other, and that's just rhetoric trying to prove a point, and it's not. It's neither rational nor real. But let me say this: that already baked into the MTA's plans and budgeted for are new signaling on Sloat east of the Great Highway, right at Sloat. Cars will turn and go up and have access to points south or points east on Sloat. That's all there. So the Great Highway extension that is closing is not really relevant to this conversation, nor is the part of the Great Highway that is north of Lincoln. It's not relevant to this conversation. These are distractors, and I think anybody that drives out there knows that, and that's all I'd say on that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It is, I think, a point of confusion for people sometimes.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And then I know, Heidi, you had indicated a point that you wanted to kind of refute a little bit earlier, and so I wanted to give you an opportunity to do that so that you guys maybe can go back and forth a little bit, and then we can do a closing.
Well, a few things. One, Richard references his lived experience of feeling frustrated and congestion. There was a study that came out just yesterday, a national study.
I never said anything about frustration at all. I talked about gases coming out of cars while they sit in traffic.
Okay.
So to be honest, we should stick to that as the point.
Okay. So a study came out yesterday showing that San Francisco is the only city in the United States where congestion and vehicle miles traveled are down in the United States, first off. Secondly, you talked about your lived experience. I also have my lived experience. The difference between our two lived experiences, both being West Side residents, I'm the one who lives in the Sunset, and my lived experience is the one backed up by countless studies. Over 10, 20 years of studies as the city and state have looked at what is the best use of this stretch of road between Lincoln and Sloat. So again, you mentioned wanting facts. The facts support this, and just because you do not agree with the facts does not mean that they are the real evidence on what we know about rerouting traffic, what we know about impact on the environment of reallocating road lanes for park space, and what we know about what that can do for our community.
I'll give you an opportunity just to kind of come back on that a little bit, and then I'm going to pull you guys into the closing statement.
I'll come back a little bit and say that a half-truth is a whole lie. Everything I've said here today is factual. I don't have, I'm a practical person. I know this area really well, and quite honestly, I think it's a big, high price to pay for. Let me restate this and say exactly what I mean here. My lived experience is meaningful, and I guess I'm just sort of speechless because there's lots of good things and it's beautiful and it's everything else, but we shouldn't be even having this conversation. We should be working during this compromise period with weekend closures and coming up with what's best for that area out there and removing all these inferences from facts and studies. There are many studies also that say just the contrary. It's not about the studies, it's about the future and how we plan for the future. And I don't think we should be planning for the future having discussions like we're having here. And I have to say a lot of what I hear is inference on facts that is not a fair inference. It just isn't.
Thank you both for your time. We appreciate you giving a little bit more information to the voters and, resolving a few questions that people have about the measure. So I'd like to invite you to make closing comments, and I'm actually going to start with Richard on this one.
Thank you. I have 2 minutes, you said?
Yep, 2 minutes.
I'll try and be briefer than that. According to the CTA's study on uses of the Great Highway, a full closure is the most expensive proposal, and I can cite the page number for that. It is also an evacuation route for the northwest side of the city. And let me refer you to the Department of Emergency Management's Emergency Plan Transportation section, page 25. We are on the northwest side in the Richmond, we are island off with the closure of the Great Highway. But at $5.7 million cost to close it, plus $1.7 million annually, that makes it the highest priced alternative according to the County Transportation Authority. And I have to come back to the equity argument. Why would we be adding parks in the Richmond when we don't have any money? This doesn't give money for restrooms, for garbage cans. It doesn't give any money for anything. There's no plan. The controller's statements were narrow in this topic. It had to do with the cost of closure, not mitigating the costs of closure, and that's what the Transportation Authority did. And I really encourage folks to really take a look. And if you live on the east side of town and you don't use the Great Highway, imagine a major thoroughfare in your neighborhood that you rely on to get around would be closing. And let me speak about children a little bit. The school district is closing schools all over town. They're going to announce that in October. I know from the proponents' statements that nearly 60% of the school-age kids are driven to school. Those kids are all going to be making different trips. Why wouldn't we wait, play out this compromise pilot period where we can study and solve these problems? And I'm going to tell you why. Well, maybe we should ask the other side, why now? They say it's the greatest opportunity of your lifetime. I think it's the greatest opportunity for them because they have politicians who are embattled or seeking re-election who are not standing up to this. And they should be.
Thank you. And Heidi?
Thank you. Well, Richard, that's interesting you say you love the compromise because your group has repeatedly done everything it can, including lawsuits, appealing to the Board of Appeals multiple times, trying to end the weekend compromise that we have now, and trying to make it a road full time. 2 years ago, your group brought a ballot proposition, Proposition I, to San Francisco to return it to being a 24/7 road for cars. So it feels disingenuous for you to laud the compromise now. Secondly, I'll say that this is what Prop K offers to us is an opportunity to take a very lemony road and make lemonade out of this. To the point about funding, passing Prop K is the first step to be able to create a visionary park for our city. And the funding for it will not have to come from the city. The funding actually, because this is California coast, which is so special and in need of protection, it opens up state and federal funding to protect and preserve and build accessibility for our coast. So it luckily will save the city money, as the city comptroller report says. It will not take away from our other rec and park spaces. And we're so fortunate in San Francisco that if we can pass Prop K, we live in a city that makes beautiful parks. And you reference an equity issue in the Bayview. There's already an incredible, enormous park being built in the Bayview. And yes, more parks in our city is wonderful, and that's what we're trying to do with Prop K. I also just want to leave folks with, this is 2024, and a moment where you reference children. I'm currently parenting young children who are school age. Our schools have to add wildfire days and excess heat days because we are living in a climate crisis. Voting yes on Prop K is a vote for the environment. It's a vote to take a changing road, to acknowledge that we live in a dynamic city with a dynamic coast, and Prop K recognizes that the next step in our coastal evolution is recognizing we're going to change our traffic patterns, but we cannot be quibbling about 0 to 3 minutes change in a commute. We need to take steps. As the saying goes, think globally, act locally. Prop K, San Francisco, is our opportunity to act locally, to turn left one street earlier and really take steps to protect our coast, build accessible, joyful spaces for all of us. It is, as a weekend park, thousands of people already come there. So vote yes on K, and it's a vote for our environment, for our kids, and
Thank
for our
you
city.
very much, Heidi. Thank you.
Could it, since she did bring up something that she said that I was disingenuous about, I'd like 30 seconds to rebut.
Okay, 30 seconds, and then I'll let you, we'll still
Sorry.
close with you. That's fine.
She spoke of lawsuits, Heidi spoke of lawsuits. I can't speak to splinter groups that went off and filed a lawsuit. I can tell you the one lawsuit I know of went absolutely nowhere. It was dismissed very quickly. But you know what? This is, to say that due process and people seeking remedies for situations they're uncomfortable with is somehow bad is, I think, unconscionable. But let me say this. If you want to go to the zoo and you live in the Richmond to see the pandas that are coming, you're going to go 40 blocks out of your way to get to the same spot. So climate change, sea level rise, greenhouse gases, I'm not a scientist, but I know you drive 40 more blocks to turn up to Sunset Boulevard and go down and come back down again. I know that more exhaust is going to come out of the car.
Thank you very much. And then Heidi?
Well, my dear friend Richard, you are not a scientist. You are also not a mathematician. It is not 40 blocks out of your way.
I have an MBA, so I can tell you 48th Avenue to 37th Avenue.
I live on the lower grade highway. For folks who need to get places in the Sunset, they can use streets that get them there. But the vast majority of people driving on the grade highway are not Richmond folks coming to the Sunset. That's about 5% of trips. It is people going to or from the South Bay. So we can get everywhere we need to go. Literally not one parking space, not one destination will become inaccessible by car because this section of the Great Highway has no off-ramps and no parking spaces. So you can literally drive everywhere you need to go, and a vote for yes on Prop K lets us make coastal adaptations we need and creates a park that is already beloved and desired by the community on the weekends. So it's a rare
Thank
win-win,
you so much.
feel-good
All right, thank
proposition.
you so much. I really appreciate both of you. Clearly, you're both passionate about this, and I really appreciate you taking the time today to come in and give the voters a little bit more information on why, to support Prop K or why to not support Prop K. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
Appreciate
for
it.
the
Yep,
opportunity.
thank
Yeah.
you.